Good afternoon, RGEA members and guests. Welcome to today's webinar, RGEA 2025 State and Local Legislative Year-End Recap, presented by Tim O'Connell, Executive Director of RGEA, and Jackson Cozort, Associate Executive Director and Director of Government Relations. Neither needs an introduction. However, both have been working extremely hard this year to ensure you have the most up-to-date information and to stay in the know. RGEA is fortunate to have these two individuals who spend countless hours working for all of us. I'm so honored to have them as our guests today. I'm Daryl Davis Fulmer and excited to serve as your host. I also want to thank Tracy Eubanks for her technical support today. Before we get started, here are a few things you should know. Each of you has been muted to help ensure the presenters can be heard. This presentation is being recorded. We will send you the link to the recording along with the PowerPoint in our follow-up email. For those of you who sent questions, we submitted them to Jackson and to Tim, and many have been incorporated in the discussion. If you think of a question during the presentation, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom page. Questions will be answered during the Q&A period, if not before. So, in the essence of time, I just want to welcome Jackson and Tim, and let's begin. Take it away, Jackson.
All right, Daryl, thank you so much for having us, and thank you all for who have joined in. I believe we had over 600 people sign up for this, and at this time of the year in the early holiday season, those are fantastic numbers. Like Daryl said, we have a whole lot of information to cover today, so we are going to, and also try to leave about 10 minutes at the end for any other questions that anybody has that we have not covered during the presentation. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. The main things that we have a lot of things to discuss today. The main things we are talking about today. First, we are going to give a legislative overview. We're going to talk about all the important legislation that happened this year. We're going to go over the 2025 state budget or lack thereof. We're also going to jump into one of the most important bills that's going to impact the future of not just the teasers, but especially the elders in the upcoming future. We're going to talk about behind the scenes insights on all of their elders issues, the state health plan update, and we're going to close it all out with a lake case update because probably 30% of the questions submitted had to do with an update on the lake case. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into it. As Daryl discussed, Tim O'Connell, our executive director, our fearless leader, and I'm Jackson Cozort, our director of government relations. But we're not the only boots on the ground. Our main contract lobbyist is Ashley Perkinson. A little bit about her. She's been a lobbyist for over 20 years. She's a UNC undergrad and law school graduate. She was 2011 Triangle Business Journal's top 40 under 40 in 2021, which was the last time they did official lobbyist rankings. She ranked in the top 25 lobbyists in the state by North State Journal. She is on the board of trustees for the North Carolina Symphony, and she's also the UNC Alumni Association board. And we also have Jack Cozort, who who's been a lobbyist for this organization for well over 25 years. Right now, he is mainly just covering the lake case. But he went to NC State undergrad, Wake Law. He was Governor Hunt's head legal counsel, almost straight out of law school. He was a Court of Appeals judge for over a decade. He was on the NC State Board of Trustees, and he was 2016 NC State's Alumnus of the Year. So we have a great team, and we are in fantastic hands. Legislative overview. This is the 2025 long session, or was. The North Carolina legislature works on a 2-year cycle where the odd number years, like 2025, are the long session, and the even number years are the short session. So in the long session, which is what we were in this year, that is where most of the substantial legislation is passed. technically the short session is only supposed to be bills that have passed crossover during the long session or local bills. Now, crossover is a deadline during the long session where a bill has to pass the chamber it has been introduced in to be still be eligible for the rest of the long session or the short session in 2026. Now, there are a few loopholes, like any bill that has an appropriation in it does not have to fall under the crossover category, and local bills are also eligible to be filed and passed through in 2026. But for the most part, most of the substantial introduction of bills happens during the long session. Um, but unfortunately, this session, they could never really get things up and running like they hope to, especially when it comes to passing legislation. We haven't done a final count yet of what the total bill number passed, but it was way lower than all of the previous sessions that we have had since I have been involved in the state legislature, which has been about 15 years. And also, most importantly, the primary goal of the long session is to pass a state budget. And if you have been paying attention to the news, you know that we have not at all passed a budget yet. It's December, but we're going to get more into that later on. Um, Although there was not much legislation passed at all, there was some pretty important legislation that was either brought up, filed, passed that had something to do with retirees, either teasers, elders, or both. The first one we want to talk about is we got a lot of questions on this one too. This was probably one of the largest and most widely covered bills this legislative session by the press. It is House Bill 92. It is the Digital Assets Investment Act, known as the crypto bill. Now, this put our organization in a unique situation because House Bill 92 was the Speaker of the House's bill. He was a main sponsor of this bill, and it is very unique for the actual Speaker of the House in the House or the President pro tem of the Senate to actually be a main sponsor of the bill. Um, Unfortunately, rgea, we had to come out against this bill because we just feel that at this point in time, digital assets, aka cryptocurrency, is not the kind of stable investment we believe that the state should be investing in when it comes to our pension. We had numerous meetings with the treasurer's office, as well as the Speaker of the House, as well as the Senate. Um, Now, a kind of a little bit of inside information on this bill. What this bill did was it gave the treasurer the ability. It didn't mandate. It gave him the ability to invest a certain amount of our pension into digital assets, cryptocurrency. A lot of people thought it would force him to do that. That is not what it did. We met with the treasurer about this, and he said that he did not foresee him having any appetite whatsoever to invest that type of money into digital assets. But what still made us lose a little bit of sleep at night was, even though he's the treasurer now, we don't know who would be the treasurer in the future. This bill passed the House because it was the Speaker of the House's bill. Um, and we kind of met behind closed doors with the Senate, and the Senate told us for one of the first few times, the Senate also agreed with us and listened to us that they didn't think that this was a good bill for this year. And so, although it passed the House, House Bill 92 died in the Senate and did not move in the Senate. And so, as of now, there is no mandate or any new legislation that happened this year that has to do with the investments of cryptocurrency. So that was a big win for rgea. The next one is House Bill 387. This is Eliminate Tax on Government Retirees. This is a fantastic bill. Although it did have some really good um, ma- uh, majority sponsorship. Unfortunately, this bill did not move at all this year. Basically, this bill makes income received from teasers and elders exempt from the income tax, which is fantastic. In the future, RGEA, we are going to keep pushing for this bill. We thanked both the sponsors, Representative Sheetzel and Representative Honeycutt, for bringing this bill forward. We asked what we could do to help. They said right now, this bill this year is not going to move anywhere, but it's just filed to keep the conversation going. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep the conversation going. So House Bill 90 and House Bill 564, these were our two COLA bills for the year. The first one, House Bill 90, was predominantly a Democrat sponsored state and local government retiree COLA. So it included state and local. Unfortunately, it did not even get a committee hearing, as well as House Bill 564, which just had to do with state retirees' cost of living increase slash funds. And it was a more Republican sponsored bill, but even that bill did not get a hearing in committee either. But that being said, these are what's called appropriations bills. These bills never usually get hearings in appropriations committee meetings. They mostly get wrapped into the budget. And so the fact that they didn't get a hearing this year is not unusual because they are because they are put into the budget anyway. But the fact that we didn't even get a budget this year is very unusual. And then the last one, which we are going to talk a lot with about later, is House Bill 506, the 2025 State Investment Modernization Act. We're going to talk in depth about that one, and also the House Senate Bill 257, which is the 2025 State Appropriations Act. This is the budget. This is the main reason why they come into session during the long session. So let's jump right in and talk everything budget. So, like I've said, on the even years, 2025, the long sessions, this is when the legislature, their number one priority is passing this main comprehensive budget. So they alternate every 2 years because the legislature works on a biennial process. So, for instance, in 2023, the House got the first crack at the budget. So they do their version of the budget, they pass it over to the Senate does their version of the budget, they meet in the middle, hopefully they come to an agreement, they pass a comprehensive budget. In 2025, this was the Senate's turn. So the Senate took the first crack at the budget, and then they passed it over to the House, and the House did their version of the budget. Now, as soon as we saw this happen, we knew that this was going to be a very long process between the House and the Senate coming together because these two versions of the budget were astronomically different. And they had basically four key issues, which became four key hangups for why we never got a budget passed this year. And you're going to see a theme. You're going to see a theme emerge. The Senate first was tax package. The Senate wanted much deeper tax cuts, larger tax cuts. They wanted smaller teacher increases. They wanted smaller state employee increases, and they had nothing at all in their budget as far as a COLA or a bonus goes for our teasers. The House, different. They did not want as big as tax cuts. They had larger teacher raises. The House had higher state employee raises, and the House included a 3% over 2 year one time bonus for our teasers. Um, they were supposed to come back once about every month from August on to work on this budget to see if they could come up with some kind of comprehensive budget putting these things two together. But these hangups, for the first time that I think in the history since this state was a colony, for the first time ever, the legislature has not produced a budget during the long session to go to the governor. So that's really put a lot of people in the state with big question marks of where are we going? What is going to happen next year? Because until they pass a budget, we will not see teacher raises. We will not see state employee raises. We will not know whether our state retirees will be getting a bonus or a COLA. Now, what we're hearing about where are we going next? What's next? Um, we have heard from leadership in both the House and the Senate that they are not looking to do any kind of budget work or take up the budget after the primary is done in early 2026, but most likely not until the actual short session starts in May. So it's going to be a little while until we finally figure out what is going to happen with the state budget, what's going to happen with these state employee raises, what's going to happen with our retirees, and not just that, what's going to happen with these infrastructure projects that that need to be funded for the next year. So there's a lot of question marks, but we'll keep you updated with anything that we hear. But the next one, a little bit of good news, actually great news for both not just our teasers but our Elgers. RGEA, well, early on in the session, once the new treasurer took over in January, he contacted our organization and he told us what he was trying to do and his goals, most of which kind of came to fruition in House Bill 506, which was the 2025 State Investment Modernization Act. Um, so a little bit of history behind this bill. This bill, its main goal was to change how the state invested its money. North Carolina was one of the only three states left in the country that kind of ran its investments under what's called a sole fiduciary model. That is where the treasurer had complete power. Whatever he said goes. We were one of the last three states to do this. What this bill did was this changed the state's investment model from a sole fiduciary model to an appointed advisory board. That is where the treasurer doesn't have all the power anymore. There is an advisory board that is appointed, one appointee from the House, one appointee from the Senate, one appointee from the governor, one appointee from the treasurer. And they all come together to help advise the treasurer on how to invest this money. Um, but we have great news. Now, even though this board does not take effect until January, under the new treasurer, we've had a fantastic year of investment returns. Why does this matter? Unlike teasers, and I don't want to, Tim's going to get more in depth to Elgers. The only way that Elgers can receive a bonus or a COLA is on these investment returns. They have to have a 6.5% investment gain over an average of 3 years to even be eligible to be able to get a bonus or a COLA. Unlike the teasers, where if we don't hit the numbers, if we don't hit these investment numbers, we always have an extra lifeline with the legislature to try to give us extra money to add a bonus or a COLA for teasers. But I am very happy to say that it is looking like this new treasurer who took over in January, keep in mind that magic number at 6.5%. It looks like we are going to end this year about 12% in the positive. And Tim, you can correct me if anything has changed on that. And that is even without this investment board taking over, which starts in January. So, even though it has been a tough year for everybody, especially teachers, state employees, and retirees, there is a little light at the end of the tunnel because if we continue on this route of these really good investment returns, we're not going to have to ask the legislature. It's great for Elgers, but it's great for teasers too because we won't have to ask the legislature for anything. So this is it's a very bright spot in what's been kind of a dark year, but it was a fantastic partnership between the Treasurer's Office and RGEA, and this is some legislation that we are very, very proud of that we were able to get passed this year. And so to go into a little bit more in depth on this and Elgers, I am going to pass it over to Tim O'Connell, our Executive Director.
All right, Jackson, that's a whole lot going on, and you did a great job encapsulating it. So I appreciate that. And thanks for teeing me up on this. So I'm going to begin by sharing some terms. So when we say these words, we make sure everybody's understanding them because there's a lot of acronyms and strange sounding words, and we're going to make it easy for you here. So the first one, and you heard Jackson saying it, but for the local government retirement system, that's for our local government retirees. We use the term, and so does the treasurer, is Elgers, L-G-E-R-S. It sounds like Elgers. So if you hear myself or Jackson or somebody from the treasurer's office saying Elgers, they are referring to the local government retiree pension plan. So Elgers is what we're speaking of. Um, so you know what specifically what that plan is? It is something that is a defined benefit plan. The pension, you'll hear it also called a defined benefit plan. What that means is your money that you've put in and your employer money, it is a guaranteed payout on that. It is a guaranteed payout for that amount. That is different from a defined contribution plan, like a 401k. That is you definitely know what you're putting into it. You don't know what you're exactly going to get out of it. Depending on when you invest, it may go up, it may go down, but it's all about what's the amount of money you're putting into it. Where a pension's more about what are you going to get out of it. It provides that fixed benefit. It's stable. So when you hear the market is up and you're going, hey, where's my extra? I heard the market was up. It's a fixed benefit. So it is a guaranteed stable amount. When it drops, when you see markets going down, or for example, when 2008 recession, those type of major economic downturns, it is still the same amount. So it's stable in that sense. The reason it remains stable, and this is important to note, is the employer bears the risk on the plan. So what that means is when it does not hit its mark, the 6.5% that Jackson mentioned, that cost goes to an unfunded liability, and that unfunded liability is picked up, in this case, by the local governments that you work for. So it's really important that we are hitting those metrics, that 6.5%. We want to keep the plans reasonable, and it is doable to hit that amount. But just know the reason that you continue to get that benefit and the plan stays healthy and strong is because the employer costs are absorbing it when it does miss. So that amount, 20, 25 years ago might have been around 6.5, 7%. That amount now for employers is between, depending if you're law enforcement or not, between 14 and 16% right now for the employers. So they're absorbing the misses of the plan through the years. We do not want that for them. We do not want that for us. So just want you to know how that works and how how a pension really kind of comes together. The majority of the plans in the country, and when I say the majority, it's roughly around 68, 70% right now. COLAs are automatic. A cost of living adjustment is baked into the plan. That is not the case in North Carolina. We would love to work towards that. But right now, the way the plan is written and the legislation is written, cost of living adjustments are not automatic. And that's why you have rgea. All right, next slide, please, Jackson. All right, so here's some news more on Elgers. We know what Elgers stands for now, but the plan itself is last year valued around $35 billion. That's billion with a B. So all those contributions you've made, that the employers have made, plus the investments, those are tallying. At the beginning of the year, around 35 billion. As Jackson mentioned, it's been a strong year, so I'm anxious to see what that new number is at year end. But it is one of the largest pension plans in the country. So it's in the top 20%. So there's plans that literally have just a couple hundred people in it. Ours is one of the largest in the country. Right now, there's 88,000 retirees participating in it, receiving benefits, and there's roughly 145,000 actives in that plan. So it's, this plan is large, it is strong, it is, it takes care of a lot of people right now, and it's designed to take care of a lot of people in the future. So among its funding levels, and this is what I was referring to when we talk about the funding levels, it's funded around 85%. So 85% means if this does not happen, this is a hypothetical scenario, but it's what actuarials, the folks that do the math on the plans, it's how they kind of look at things. If everything had to be paid out today, we would have to we'd be able to pay right now 85 cents on the dollar that is owed. So it is underfunded at the moment. As Jackson mentioned, that amount most likely will move. Typically with a good year like this, it'll move up. There's some other factors that can kind of neutralize that, but 12% return is a very strong return for the fund. And so that 85% funding is going to probably benefit from a strong return year, at least in that one channel. So that is good news. So it's moving up. It is still one of the most well-funded plans in the country. It is in a tier, kind of, I would say an elite tier on its funding levels. Some funds, and these are the ones that you probably hear about, and these are simply just, I can say nothing less than mismanaged, but they're around 20%, and that's kind of rough. They still pay out benefits, but like I was saying, if everybody retired on the same day was going to say, I need my benefits today, that plan, those folks would get 20 cents on the dollar for their plan. So that's kind of how an unfunded balance is looked at and utilized, but it really is kind of our way we see funds. So we have a strong plan, well-funded, large, good news for Elgers and all that. I'm ready for the next slide, Jackson. Thank you. So the important things, and I'm going to dial this in specifically for Elgers. The Investment Modernization Act is probably most influential on Elgers because Elgers can only deliver a COLA when the fund hits that 6.5% on average. It has not, and if you're in local government, it has not. I don't really need to tell you that, because when it does, and it does over a 5-year average, there's the potential for COLAs. The good news is, and I would not say this if it was not my background in statistics, and I look at averages, and I'm kind of my world is numbers from that standpoint. The odds of COLAs coming in the future are vastly improving with Investment Modernization Act for a number of reasons. One of the key reasons, and this was within the statutes, but also I would say some of the I'm going to use the term volatility in allocation decisions that may happen in leadership changes within the Treasurer's office. Those are kind of neutralized with the investment authority board that Jackson had mentioned there. As he was sharing, in the past, one person ultimately had the authority to make decisions on the asset allocation. That's where your money that you put in that fund, how it's invested. North Carolina has typically been very conservative, which is great. It's a pension. You want to stay moderately conservative, but we've been very conservative. We've held historically a bit more in cash reserves than most other states. The past 8-10 years prior, we held up to 5 times the amount that some states did. So what this did to the plan, especially during that period, was even when earnings were going great in other asset allocations, public equities, other things like that, you looked over, and because we had a high percentage of the total fund in cash, and cash isn't going to get you the same return. It's a good security, but if you're over secure, you're over conservative. In North Carolina, both Elgers and teasers missed out on some income that could have been earned for the plan. during that period. So, roughly over that time, about 1.5% annually, that leads to billions of dollars over time that could have been going into the fund. That hurt the fund. That is changing. The treasurer has already done work to rebalance those funds. That and his investment team. In the future, because of the investment authority, things will be looked at a little bit differently, and decisions like this will be, I would say, more robustly vetted. Not that they weren't in the past, but this gives the opportunity in the governance for it to be more robustly vetted to make those type of decisions. So this is, I'm going to say, life-changing, because it's fair to say, because the COLAs can be life-changing. So the work being done here is really important. I would not be saying this if I did not believe it. We actually, as an organization, had hired an external organization of experts in investment analysis about 2 years ago. They provided us the research that we shared with a number of folks, including the treasurer, on our findings. He was very much in agreement, and with his background, he very much understood what we were sharing with him. So RGA was leading in this direction to get things changed, specifically for Elgers. So our study would focus only on Elgers. We knew it would yield better outcomes for teasers as well. But we've been saying, if we can help solve Elgers, we can help solve teasers. So we started with Elgers to try to make difference. Those differences are happening. Just for comparison, the past 5-year evaluation, what the returns were, showed that North Carolina averaged about 5.6%. That's, there were stronger averages in certain years, but in 2022, markets kind of turned upside down, especially the bond markets. North Carolina took a hard hit. Actually, was one of the lowest performing pensions in the country at that year. That average is still being worked through the returns. So one of the questions, and it wasn't just one, there were a lot of you asking, when's the next COLA going to be? When could that happen? The potential for that happen begins in 2027 as that 2022 return rolls off the books. So a 12%, knock on wood, I haven't heard what they're doing with the interest rates, if they're going up or down. I know today's the day on that. If returns stay buoyant for the plans, very strong year, and the potential for a COLA or a bonus looks probable in 2027. Folks are saying, hey, why not 2026? Why not now? It's by the statutes that those can be awarded. The trustees have the power to do it when it hits the thresholds. So the local government trustees do not have the authority until it hits that 6.5% threshold average over those 5 years. Then they're given the authority to release additional funds for retirees. So I wish it was today. I wish it was 2026. But what I'm saying to you is, the thing that has been stymieing the plan for a good while, that barrier is being removed. And I'm feeling very positive about that, particularly for local government. So the national average, as I was saying, was closer to about 7.2% for the past 5 years in our peer group. If you just think, if ours was 7.2% during that same period, there would have been COLAs during those years. So good news is coming. I wish it was today. I know it's needed today, but we have been part of making long-term changes to the plans that are being directed by Treasurer Briner. And I will say this now, but kudos to the good work that they've done to get this legislation put through and make the changes. Transparency, I want you to know on this, a lot of folks, there's a lot of questions about transparency. Treasurer Briner is doing a great job on that. He just did a press conference. I think we released it as part of our news from Jones Street in there. But it's important for you to stay tuned, and you don't have to be a pension expert to what is happening with the pensions, what's going on with those things. But transparency is really important. The thing we also do, every issue of Living Power, we still have that third-party organization that analyzes the returns. The Treasurer's Office has well-qualified people doing it as well. We are just checking it to reinsure you as members that everything is being looked at and the kind of returns that we may have done, the issues in the past, those won't happen in the future. So I want you to know there's transparency out there. I can tell you more. I could probably have a whole show on where to find the information, but between the treasurer's office, what they're releasing and kind of what we do, and then also our experts that we bring in to look at those and validate those findings as well. So transparency is really important. Stay tuned to that. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the 5-year experience study. This happens by statutes every 5 years, sort of the assumptions that are made on how a pension is going to act and perform during a certain period. How did it actually do when you look back on those 5 years? That has just been completed this past fall. The trustees are looking at that information. A lot of that information may be incorporating some of the change things that we're talking here as well. Again, good for elders, update the plan, begin to kind of work some of the changes that the treasurer's team is bringing more formally into the plans. But that study, we've been, I've got it right here, actually, my copy's on top of it, and it lifts it up about 3 inches. If you look at the study, it's quite thick. We've gone page by page through that, and we've had great conversations with the treasurer's team on sort of things we see with that, and they've been great about explaining that too. But just know that's another way that your pension is being looked at and being improved, and RGA has been part of that. Next slide, please, Jackson. So elders advocacy, there's, Jackson and I and the team, we look at this. I tend to go deep into local government. Just point of fact, I began my career in local government working in parks and recreation for a local town. It is near and dear to me, the importance, and I've worked throughout my career with local government entities, and I believe so much in the community and what it does. So very passionate about this, and just sharing a little bit on how we advocate for it. But one of the biggest thing to do, as I mentioned, is maintain awareness of the pension performance results. So look for this in each issue of Living Power, the returns and seeing how it's doing. That's really important. Again, 6.5% is that magic number we're looking for over time, over a 5-year average. Then the next thing that we do is the elders statutes are written by the legislature. So the laws of local government obviously are written by the legislature. So there's some things that we've been looking at and will continue that we can do some improvements. One was in 2020 that there was a slight alteration to the statutes that gave the trustees greater latitude in awarding money in the terms of bonuses for elders in particular. So that was a 2020 change. So we will continue to do that as things evolve, but we want a high-performing pension, and we want statutes that work well with that high-performing pension to deliver the benefits and the COLAs that you need and deserve. So next slide, please, Jackson. All right. Couple more key things, and I'm just going to drive this through, but the investment returns, again, there's no other way for elders to get that COLA or a bonus delivered unless it's the returns. Returns are really important. We will do everything to keep you informed on that. If you see something and you want to ask a question, feel free to call in. Everything is out there. There's a way to find it on the treasurer's site as well on where the investments are going and how they're doing and all that. But if you've got quick questions and you want a layman's answer, and that's what we'll give you, give us a call. We're glad to help on that. So there's a little bit more on the statutes here that I'm sharing, and we can go through. You can move to the next one, Jackson. We're good on those, I think. All right. Changing gears, if some questions in the chat come through on local government, I'll be glad to answer those. State health plan news, I'm going to give a quick overview, but the source truth on this is the state health plan website. Please go to that for clarification on these things. But what you have heard about happening, I mean, particularly for actives, you're seeing it in the news again. What's been rolled out is a salary tiered premium plan. There's increases coming for the actives right now. I'm sure we all wish that was not the case for our state health plan folks, but that is the case. But they're being tiered. So if a lower wage state employee needs health care, it's going to cost less than for a executive level person. So I think that's a great thing. I worked for the state for a period, and it did break my heart at times where I knew some folks were struggling on their healthcare premiums, especially if their families were part of it. And I think this is one way to get at that. I wish the premiums were not going up, but healthcare costs are going up, and that's they're doing the best they can, I guess, at the moment. The next piece on this is the vested retiree benefit plan is relatively unchanged from Medicare Advantage. I think if you have not seen some of the webinars on this, they've delivered. You've heard about that. Their message about carrying two cards, the only difference really is that you're going to have to carry two cards. One, I believe it's a pharmacy benefit, and one's for your healthcare. So if you be on the lookout, if they have not been mailed or you do not have those cards, I believe they're going to be on the way. Again, go to the state health plan site to learn more about that. Last piece on this is the Medicare programs. And if you're in Medicare, you know this. The premiums, if you're vested, that is part of what is protected by the late case. But also in your benefits, it was delivered to you that your premiums may be free, but other costs will be going up in that area. So just know that that is something that if you haven't run your numbers on that for your budget next year, you probably should. But again, state health plan is the place to go and get the deep detail on this. If you have not worked, I'm gonna give a quick plug for SHIP. SHIP is excellent. I'm not Medicare age yet. I'm heading towards it very shortly, but know that that is a great resource and to get your information about your Medicare plans. The last thing I want you to know this, because this is a change. If you anyone who is an active employee and began after January 1, 2021, the retirement benefit in healthcare is no longer part of a package for active employees, and ultimately for the retiree. That's a pretty big deal. If you're on the plan, you really have a good value there in your healthcare, even if with it going up. If you're out there on the open market and it's very expensive, but the thing here is the current employees that were hired after January 1, 2021 do not have that. Still, that's kind of unusual across the country. The majority of public plans have some type of healthcare benefit in retirement for it. So North Carolina is at this stage an outlier in that area. I would love to see that change, but there are definitely challenges in healthcare costs, and all those things. But as far as the future for the future employees, that's going to be something that it's going to be a challenge as they put in their time investing in the retirement plan and don't necessarily have healthcare plan. All right, next one, Jackson, please. Okay, I'm going to go into the late case, and the important thing here, legal disclaimer, is I'm going to stick pretty much to the script from the website that is provided by the law firm that's representing the late case plaintiffs. But the important thing is, a lot of times, what is the late case? I was just speaking on this yesterday. It's been around for a long time. Again, we live it and talk to folks every day about it. But for those not familiar with it, let me begin with the case. So the case really comes down to about 15, 16 years ago, the 80/20 non-contributory health plan benefit for retirees was eliminated. There was an option to have a lower contributory plan, but it wasn't the 80/20. So that's the key issue in the case. It was by, in the writing, it was a benefit, and a reduction in that benefit is where the case began. The Lake case, if you grew up in North Carolina, I did. I remember being in Durham County, and I would see, Beverly Lake uh, uh, signs up around my neighborhood. But Beverly Lake was the chief justice for the Supreme Court. So he is one of the plaintiffs and the lead plaintiff on this case, the named plaintiff in this case. So the gentleman that's the lead plaintiff was the chief justice for North Carolina. So kind of a big deal for them to put their name to a case like this. The case, who else is included in that is roughly, originally was around 220,000 individuals. That number, unfortunately, because of the years that have passed and this being adjudicated, that number has decreased, but originally was around 220,000 people that were part of this case. I'm going to read exactly who's part of the case. Again, for the source truth on this, please go to the website that's listed above. But the plaintiff case includes all stated retirees who vest in retirement health benefits and certain surviving spouses. The plaintiff class includes explicitly all members of the NC Teachers and State Employees Retirement System, teasers, who retired before January 1, 1988. Teasers members who retired on or after January 1, 1988 were hired before October 1, 2006 and had 5 or more years of contributory service with the state of North Carolina, and certain surviving spouses of former state employees or retirees, provided that the death of the employee or retiree occurred before October 1, 1986. This class was certified as a class in a class action suit in September of 2016. So just putting the timetable to this lawsuit has outlived most of the folks, quite honestly, that filed these. Unfortunately, Chief Justice Lake passed a few years ago. There's a lot of folks out there that are still waiting to hear the outcome on this. But that is who is part of this case. Next page, please, Jackson. All right. So here's the latest on the case. And I'm going to read, this summarizes, and again, if you go to the website, it is a long history of legal cases and lots of law documents. You can read that if you wish, but I'm going to read this, and then again, I can take some simple questions on this, but I would prefer most of your questions being directed. You can go to the website or contact the representing firm. So on March 11, 2022, the NC Supreme Court issued its opinion holding that eligible state employees have contractually vested right in non-contributory health plan for life, equivalent to the plan in place when a class member's rights vested. The NC Supreme Court remanded the case to the trial court to determine whether the defendant's post-2011 actions substantially impaired this contractual right, and if so, the resulting damages. Further proceedings in the trial court before Judge Edwin Wilson will resume after the remand is finalized. After remand to trial court, the additional discovery was conducted. This included actuarial and economic reports that were created by experts and retained by the plaintiffs and defendants. Depositions were taken of plaintiffs' actuary and economists and defendants' actuary and economists. And here's the final, this is the latest right here. So in the bold, defendants filed a motion for a summary judgment and a motion to decertify the class. So the defendants, the state, filed a motion to decertify the class. That means they are calling into question whether the class that was approved again in September 2016 is still a class. Both motions were denied by the trial court. However, defendants appealed to the denial of their motion to decertify the class on April 11, 2025. That appeal is pending at the North Carolina Supreme Court. The trial, which was previously scheduled for March 3, 2025, has been stayed pending the appeal. So it is before the Supreme Court looking at the denial of the motion to decertify the class that was filed by the state. So that how that came about, there was a House bill in 2017, House Bill 239, and that made that type of direct appeal to the Supreme Court possible, where previously it would have required a discretionary review to be heard. So made it a little bit easier, or I'd say quite a bit easier for a defendant to file this type of petition. So, this is going to be ongoing. As far as timelines, I do not have a timeline, but it is before the Supreme Court of North Carolina. So stay tuned to this. Go to the website. But this could be a big year for that case. And it's an important case for our organization. It's somewhat bedrock to us protecting retiree benefit rights that are contractual. So important case to the plaintiffs for sure, and a very important case to RGA as well. So with that, Jackson, I believe I'm going to hand it back to you, and I think we are tracking right as we wished.
All right, thank you, Tim. I know that was a ton of information in a very short amount of time, but we do have about 9 minutes left for questions, Daryl. If you wanted to pick some questions, and we will disperse those between Tim and I as we see fit.
Right, great. Thank you so much for this presentation. Uh, I'm going to start with this question. Are there representatives and or senators that have been positive toward state employee retirees? If so, would it be appropriate to send a note of thanks to them?
Hey, actually, that is a fantastic question because a lot of times people just want to know which ones they can basically not send thanks to. Um, so yes, so we have a lot of strong support in the House from both parties, for both the Democrats and the Republicans. So if you want to contact your House member and give them thanks, that would be due. Because they have really gone to bat for us, and to be completely honest, where the rubber meets the road, we are one of the main reasons why we did not get a budget this year. The House dug in their heels and they were like, well, if the Senate or if they are not going to give if they are not going to give the teasers retirees the bonus that was in our budget, then we are not going to pass a budget. And they really dug in their heels on our behalf. So if you want somebody to think, it is your House member. It doesn't matter if they're Democrat or Republican. We have gotten a lot of support from both parties in the House. Where we have had trouble is the Senate. Mostly the leadership in the Senate, especially the appropriations chairs, and all the way to the top to Phil Berger himself. So if you would like to write a note to your senator, tell them that you appreciate their service and kindly ask them to take the House's position in their version of the budget, which was supportive of the 3% bonus for the teasers over a 2-year period. So those would be the people that you would want to speak to and specifically thank the House.
Well, and Jackson, I'm going to follow up with someone asked, is there going to be a RGEA Advocacy Day again this in 2026?
Great question. So, because of the crazy fluctuation in schedule of the short session, the long session is traditionally more predictable. But so we have decided that on the even years, which are the short sessions, we will not be doing a formal advocacy day. However, that does not mean that you cannot advocate to your legislator. All my information is right on the screen. If you would like to contact or meet with your legislator, please contact me and we will do the best that we can to make that happen. But because of the fluctuation in schedule and how unexpected it is in the short session, we have decided not to do a formal advocacy at this point.
Okay, thank you so much, Jackson. So the next question also has something to do with advocacy. So how can we best advocate for the reversal of tax cuts, especially corporate, scheduled to take effect in January 2026? If you can answer that one, or Tim.
Yeah, that's a tougher one because
Yeah.
that is rooted deep within partisan policy. So I mean the only real thing that you can do there is make your voice heard, and so that's where you would get in contact with your specific House member and senator. Um, there's a great tool on our website that where you can put in your address and it will tell you exactly who your House member and senator, who they are, and it would not hurt to email them and drop them a note. But that's a large mountain to scale right there, just because that is such an issue that's deeply rooted in policy.
Okay, great. So would this person would like to know if there's any possibility of receiving a cost of living increase every year, which is not, which, of course, we're not receiving now after all of this is settled.
Yeah, I think Tim, you can touch on that
Sure.
because that really has to do with the investment
Mhm.
returns.
Yeah. So, the key thing you'll see every waiver when they talk about financial returns, there's a waiver saying, basically there's no guarantee. But with that, there's things that you can do that increase the probability of hitting the type of return that we have at 6.5%. It quite honestly is still one of the lowest target returns in the country, which means it's not a high threshold. Some are set, 6.75, some are 7, some are 7.25, some are as high as 7.5. That can bite a plan if it gets too high. At the same time, it can hurt a plan if it gets too low. So, answering your question, we have a higher than, I would say, average probability of hitting that number more years than not, just if you're going probabilities, with the changes being made. That's still, there's, boy, it's, pins and needles on the markets. Good things are happening, but everybody's somewhat, wondering what's next. So it's hard to say, but the pieces being put together are going to increase returns systematically over time. So that's the good news. So answering your question, more often than not, as other public plans have hit that number, North Carolina should be capable of doing that. And we're going to do our part as RGA watching that. And then I think we have a very talented treasurer and treasurer team being over there right now. So I remain optimistic, and I have not always been.
Great. Thank you, Tim. This is a perfect segue into the next question. Will the treasurer be required to follow the investment advisory board, or are they simply advisory?
Oh, great question. Thank whoever asked that question. Thanks for asking. So what we had in the past was an advisory board that was sort of, everybody kind of weighs in. I think this and that, but it went to this a sole fiduciary position. That person made the final decision. With this new board, the treasurer is one among the voting members. So there's the potential. I would say there'll be a lot of consensus because they all a lot have strong investment backgrounds, but there'll also be some disagreements. So there's times the treasurer's vote may be overridden by the board. So it is a different thing. I think it's a good thing because there's a stronger vetting process to decisions, more transparent vetting process to the decisions. So that's a great question. Whoever asked that, thanks for asking that. I had that a side note to kind of clarify on that, but it's an investment authority, and that
Yeah.
means they are the authority on it, and it's a voting board, and every person has one vote.
Right. Thank you, Tim, for that. We only have time for this one last question, but for the audience's purposes, we will capture these questions and then we'll try to answer them in some form or fashion. So, how do retirees no longer living in North Carolina have a voice since they don't have specific legislators?
Jackson, would you like that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'll take a shot at that one. There's a couple different ways that you can tackle this. The first is you can reach out to the legislator where you used to live. So, like, let's say that you've moved out of town from you used to live in Wake County or Buncombe County, you can find your legislator where you used to live, and you can find their email addresses. It's all public knowledge, and you can email them or call them as well to make sure your voice is heard. And another thing that you can do is find out who's in leadership. You can find out who the appropriations chairs are. You can find out who the speaker is, who the president pro tem is, who those people who are in leadership that have to do with the issue that you're worried about, and you can always contact them as well. So even if they are not your specific senator or House member, and now let me clarify, it's always best to talk to your specific elected official. But if you have moved, even these appropriations chairs, even if they're not in your district, they are still appropriating the state's money, not just their district's money. So it is completely acceptable for you to contact those House and Senate members in leadership as well.
All right. Thank you, Jackson, for answering that question. One of our questions was not a question. It was just a huge thank you for this information. And the person stated this was very, very helpful. So I'll end with that. This is the first time we've done this, and we would appreciate if you complete the survey we will be sending out in our follow-up email along with the link and the link to the recording. It's quick and easy, and we like our responses back by Monday. Our next Lunch and Learn webinar will be held on Wednesday, January 28th at 12:30. It's Medicare and elder fraud and scams. You really want to sign up for that. Presented by Stephanie Byers from the North Carolina Department of Insurance and David Kirkman. He's a retired North Carolina Special Deputy Attorney General and author of Elder Fraud Wars. And you are aware, I'm sure, that fraud and scams are becoming more and more sophisticated and more targeted at older citizens. We're looking forward to this. Look out for the registration information. Everyone, thanks again. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Jackson. This was very informative, and we really do appreciate you too for doing all that you do for RGEA. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, the association stands ready to assist you in your retirement. Blessings, joy, and peace for a wonderful holiday season. Stay safe, everyone. And this concludes our session for today. Thank you.